In a world overflowing with constant chatter, endless comparisons, and pressures to meet unrealistic standards, it's no surprise that many of us feel as though we're perpetually lagging behind. There's that persistent voice inside our heads, the one that insists, "You're not good enough," or "Why even bother?" And it has a way of stealing our confidence and obscuring the bright potential that lies within. However, it's crucial to remember that this voice is not an unchangeable truth. It's merely a narrative we've grown accustomed to believing. What if you could replace that self-critical commentary with a kinder, more encouraging inner dialogue? Picture a mental companion who consistently spurs you toward your aspirations, rather than reinforcing the idea that you're stuck. Today we're exploring 7 transformative lessons, each inspired by Buddhist wisdom, that will show you how to break free from the grip of self-doubt and tap into a wellspring of self-assurance. These teachings aren't abstract theories reserved for meditation cushions and temples. They're accessible, practical tools you can employ every day. By putting these principles into action, you'll learn how to confront fear with courage, turn setbacks into stepping stones, and cultivate a perspective rooted in growth instead of criticism. You'll discover how to reshape that nagging voice into a supportive inner coach, one that believes in your abilities and bolsters your resolve. If you're prepared to challenge your limiting beliefs, transform them into something empowering, and step into the life you genuinely deserve, then let's begin. 1. Reframe your inner critic. In Buddhism, thoughts are often described as fleeting and impermanent, much like clouds traversing the expanse of the sky. They drift in and out of our consciousness, never truly defining who we are at our core. When we latch on to these mental formations, particularly the self-critical ones, we risk identifying with them so strongly that they feel inseparable from our identity. Yet, the wisdom of Buddhist philosophy encourages us to see that these thoughts are not static truths. Rather, they're temporary visitors shaped by our past experiences, cultural conditioning, and emotional states. Recognizing this impermanence is a powerful first step in freeing ourselves from the grip of the inner critic. The inner critic itself, with all its harsh judgments and discouraging comments, is formed through a variety of influences. Perhaps a teacher once told you that you weren't talented enough, or maybe you were raised in an environment where mistakes were not tolerated. Over time, these external critiques become internal beliefs, replaying in your mind whenever you face new challenges. Buddhism teaches that clinging to these negative thought patterns only strengthens them, turning them into a script that runs in the background of your life. However, just as the sky remains untouched by the passing clouds, the essence of who you are remains untainted by these fleeting messages. This perspective reminds us that we always have the choice to observe our thoughts with detachment rather than fully absorb them. One of the core teachings in Buddhist thought is the concept of non-identification with mental chatter. If you think of your mind as a vast sky, then thoughts, both positive and negative, are the temporary weather patterns. They may bring storms of anxiety or moments of sunshine, but they are not the sky itself. By keeping this analogy in mind, you can start to see your self-critical thoughts as mere phenomena passing through your awareness. This shift in perspective allows you to stop taking these judgments so personally. Instead of feeling like you are the storm, you recognize that you are simply witnessing it pass by. Still, it's one thing to understand intellectually that your self-critical thoughts are impermanent. It's another to experience that truth on a daily basis. Meditation and mindfulness practices provide an avenue to bridge this gap. When you meditate, you learn to observe your thoughts without getting lost in them. Rather than pushing them away or drowning in their content, you practice noting them with a sense of calm awareness. For instance, when a thought like, "I'm not good enough" appears, You can label it as self-doubt and return to your anchor, such as your breath. Over time, this repetitive process trains your mind to recognize and release negative beliefs more skillfully. Another aspect of Buddhist-inspired wisdom is the gentle and curious attitude we can adopt toward our inner critic. Rather than battling these negative thoughts head-on or trying to silence them forcefully, a more constructive approach is to welcome them as you would a concerned friend. Imagine that a close companion is anxious about whether they can succeed in a new venture. You wouldn't yell at them or dismiss their feelings. You'd likely offer reassurance or explore the roots of their worry. By extending this same compassion to your own inner critic, you create a supportive inner environment that nurtures growth instead of perpetuating fear. A practical way to embody this compassionate stance is through self-inquiry. When the thought, "I can't do this," or "I'm not capable," arises, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is that thought inherently true, or is it merely a reflection of past conditioning? If it feels more like a habit or an echo from your history, consider reframing it. For instance, if you catch yourself thinking, "I'll never succeed," replace it with a question like, "What if I tried and something positive happened?" Or, "What can I learn from giving this a fair attempt?" These reframed questions shift your internal dialogue from a place of negativity to one of possibility, opening mental doors you might have once believed were locked. In daily life, these moments of self-inquiry often arise in the face of challenges. When you're applying for a new job, initiating a difficult conversation, or pursuing a dream that feels unattainable. It's precisely at these crossroads that your inner critic can become the loudest. By acknowledging these critical voices, but refraining from letting them dictate your actions, you empower yourself to move forward. This doesn't guarantee immediate success, but it does foster resilience and a growth-oriented mindset. Each time you challenge the critic by taking an action, however small, you accumulate evidence that you are indeed capable of adapting, learning, and thriving. Furthermore, understanding the impermanence of thoughts can extend beyond self-critical judgments to all sorts of mental fluctuations, including anxiety about the future or regret over the past. From a Buddhist standpoint, worry and regret are similarly transient. They feel real in the moment, but they're simply mental constructs arising from our conditions and experiences. By recognizing their temporary nature, we can be more present with what is happening right now, where our true power to act resides. When you're fully engaged in the present, you have the opportunity to break free from cycles of negative thinking and self-limiting beliefs. At this point, you might wonder, do I need to get rid of my inner critic altogether? The short answer is no. The objective isn't to eradicate self-critical thoughts completely, because trying to do so often leads to more resistance. Instead, the goal is to transform your relationship with those thoughts. When you meet them with understanding and self-compassion, their influence diminishes naturally. They become signals that something within you needs gentle attention or reflection, rather than proof that you're somehow inadequate. In fact, when harnessed wisely, the inner critic can even provide useful insights. Sometimes its worries signal legitimate concerns that you might need to address, like improving a particular skill or preparing more thoroughly for a challenge. By listening with discernment instead of blind acceptance, you can sift through the noise to find kernels of truth that help you grow. The difference lies in whether you interpret the critic's voice as an insurmountable barrier or a simple nudge for more thoughtful effort. Beyond self-inquiry and mindfulness, you might also consider incorporating loving kindness, metta, practices into your routine. In a typical loving kindness meditation, you bring to mind various people, someone you love, someone you feel neutral about, and even someone you find challenging. and you wish them well, repeating phrases like, "May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be safe, may you live with ease." Gradually, you expand this well-wishing toward yourself. For many, this can be the toughest part because their inner critic is adept at rejecting self-directed kindness. However, with consistent practice, this meditation gently dissolves the barriers you've built against self-compassion and reminds you that you too are worthy of kindness and support. The transformation from self-criticism to self-compassion is not an overnight shift. It's a lifelong process of learning and unlearning. Each time you catch a self-defeating thought and respond with care, you're laying another brick on the path toward greater resilience and peace of mind. Over weeks, months, and years of dedicated practice, you'll likely notice that the once deafening voice of your inner critic softens into background noise. It may still arise from time to time, especially during periods of stress or transition, but you'll have the tools to engage with it in a calm, wise, and empowering way. Ultimately, the Buddhist viewpoint on the impermanence of thoughts serves as a liberating reminder. You are much more than the transient stories your mind tells about who you are and what you can achieve. By introducing mindfulness, self-inquiry, and compassion into the way you relate to your inner critic, you reclaim the power to define your own narrative. Challenges become opportunities for growth, and fears transform into catalysts for courage. Rather than fighting or denying your inner critic, you learn to hold it gently, recognizing that it's merely a conditioned voice longing for understanding and reassurance. So the next time the thought, "I can't do this," floats through your mind, remember that it's just one small cloud in the vast sky of your being. Pause, question its validity, and consider a kinder, more expansive way of interpreting your situation. In doing so, you'll find that the clouds pass more swiftly, revealing the bright and open sky that's been there all along, a sky that reflects your true nature, unburdened by limiting beliefs and ready to embrace whatever life brings your way. 2. Take small, consistent actions. In Buddhism, thoughts are often likened to passing clouds in the sky, appearing and disappearing with no real substance or permanence. One moment, a doubt or worry surfaces. The next moment, it dissolves and makes way for another train of thought. The key insight here is recognizing that these mental events do not define who you are at your core. Your true nature isn't confined to a fleeting notion that arises out of habit or fear. Instead, it is the steady, observing awareness beneath the swirl of mental chatter. This perspective can be both comforting and liberating because it reminds us that no matter how loud or persistent our inner critic becomes, we are not fused with it. We have a choice in how we respond, and that choice begins with understanding the impermanent nature of every thought. When you begin to see your negative inner voice, those familiar echoes that say, "You're not smart enough," or "You'll never succeed," as just another passing cloud, you create a gap between the thought and your sense of self. This gap is critical because it allows you to question whether the stories you tell yourself are accurate reflections of reality or simply remnants of past conditioning. Often, these critical beliefs develop early in life, shaped by experiences in childhood, remarks from authority figures, or societal standards that subtly dictate what success and worthiness should look like. By bringing curiosity to these origins, you begin to loosen their grip. Instead of seeing them as unchangeable truths, you start to recognize them as outdated assumptions that no longer serve you. Approaching your inner critic with compassion and curiosity is a fundamentally different strategy than trying to eliminate it altogether. Fighting against negative thoughts can create more tension as it sets up a battle in your mind. One part of you wants to be free, while another persists in dragging you down. Buddhism invites you to observe these conflicting parts without judgment. It suggests viewing your inner critic as a voice that simply needs reassurance, much like a worried friend who is calling out for help. This friend might be mistaken or exaggerating the situation, but rather than dismissing or silencing them, you listen kindly and respond with gentle understanding. In doing so, you transform resistance into a more harmonious internal dialogue. When a self-limiting belief arises, something like, "I can't do this," take a moment to pause and honestly ask yourself, is that thought objectively true, or is it a reflex based on fear or insecurity? You might discover that your inner critic can't offer real proof for its dire predictions. Instead, it is likely echoing the voice of doubt you've heard for years. By recognizing this, you can begin to question it more thoroughly, perhaps by countering with a prompt like, "What if I try anyway and see what happens?" Or, "Could this challenge be an opportunity to learn something valuable?" These reframing techniques gently pivot you away from rigid certainty in your own limitations and toward a mindset of open-minded possibility. Every time you interrupt a negative spiral by asking a curious question, you chip away at the authority of that inner critic. Over time, these small acts of questioning accumulate into a more empowered worldview. Rather than being a helpless spectator to your internal monologue, you become the author of a new narrative, one that acknowledges challenges without labeling them as insurmountable. This perspective also helps you embrace a growth-oriented outlook, seeing apparent failures or missteps as lessons rather than final verdicts on your worth. The freedom of this approach lies in realizing that you always have the ability to shift your vantage point, even if it's just by a small degree. With consistent practice, such shifts become second nature. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of mindfulness in working with thoughts. Mindfulness is the act of paying close attention to the present moment without rushing to judgment or letting your mind wander into habitual patterns. When you apply mindfulness to your inner critic, you notice its presence as soon as it appears. Instead of automatically believing whatever it says, you remain aware of the physical sensations in your body, the tone of your inner voice, and the emotions that accompany the thought. This level of awareness can reveal interesting patterns. Maybe your shoulders tense up when the critic speaks, or perhaps a knot forms in your stomach. Becoming conscious of these reactions helps you stay grounded. You can breathe into those tense areas, allowing them to soften, and remind yourself that this is just another passing mental event, not an absolute truth you must obey. Treating your inner critic with kindness does not mean indulging negativity. Rather, it means acknowledging that the critic's role has often been to protect you from perceived failure or rejection, albeit in an unskillful way. By recognizing the misguided intention behind the criticism, you can respond with empathy. Tell yourself, "I see that you're worried about what might happen if I step out of my comfort zone. I understand that you want to keep me safe." This gentle statement of understanding can diffuse internal conflict, making it easier to shift toward a more balanced perspective. It's like inviting your worried friend in for tea, listening patiently, and then calmly explaining why their fears, though understandable, might not reflect the entire truth of what's possible. Over time, this method of compassionate inquiry reshapes how you experience self-doubt. You no longer feel you must banish every critical thought. You simply learn to dialogue with it in a way that preserves your sense of worth. This internal conversation helps you identify genuine concerns from baseless fears, allowing you to make choices guided by clarity rather than anxiety. It transforms what might have been paralyzing worry into constructive energy. If you sense a real issue, such as needing more preparation or acquiring a specific skill, then you can address it proactively. If, however, you recognize that your fears are inflated or unfounded, You can ease them with reassurance and a willingness to keep moving forward. The beauty of this practice is that it doesn't require you to overhaul your personality or forcefully eradicate negative thinking. Human minds are naturally prone to wander into doubt, fear, and speculation. But by continually applying curiosity and compassion whenever these thoughts arise, you shift the way you relate to them. Rather than seeing them as the final verdict on who you are, you regard them as momentary appearances in the vast space of your awareness. In doing so, you reclaim the power to define yourself through your actions, intentions, and aspirations. You become, in essence, an active participant in shaping your self-concept, rather than a passive recipient of old narratives. Remember that this process is an ongoing journey. There may be days when self-doubt roars to life, and it feels nearly impossible to approach it with kindness. But even in those challenging moments, simply recognizing that you are caught in a storm of thoughts is itself an expression of mindfulness and self-awareness. You might find that during particularly stressful times, your inner critic becomes more vocal. Instead of succumbing, you can use these moments as reminders to practice with greater care. Over time, you may discover that each encounter with self-doubt holds a hidden opportunity to reaffirm your commitment to self-compassion, to deepen your resilience, and to refine your ability to witness thoughts without becoming entangled in them. Ultimately, you don't need to silence the inner critic completely. According to Buddhist teachings, the path isn't about never experiencing negative thoughts. It's about navigating them with wisdom and grace. By learning to engage your thoughts as passing visitors, you cultivate a more flexible, spacious mind that allows for a fuller exploration of life's possibilities. You shift your internal narrative from one of limitation to one of growth, all while treating yourself with the warmth and kindness you'd offer a dear companion. When you realize you have the power to shape the conversation in your own head, you begin to unlock a greater sense of freedom, one in which curiosity and courage replace fear and self-judgment. This freedom, nurtured through compassion, mindfulness, and patient practice, becomes the fertile ground from which confidence, peace, and genuine self-worth can flourish. Third, stop comparing yourself to others. One of the most potent catalysts for self-doubt is the habit of comparing yourself to others, a tendency that can quietly creep into your daily thoughts and shape the way you see your own progress. In many Buddhist teachings, however, it is emphasized that each individual has a unique path, or dharma, that unfolds according to their experiences, choices, and personal challenges. This perspective invites you to understand that your journey, with all its twists and turns, cannot and should not be measured against the path of anyone else. When you engage in comparisons, you run the risk of overlooking the personal growth you have already achieved, and the inherent value you hold simply by being who you are. No two people share precisely the same background, goals, or spiritual understanding, which is why assessing your worth in the light of someone else's accomplishments is often misleading and detrimental to your self-esteem. It may help to envision the difference between a seed and a fully grown tree. It would be unfair to look at the seed, perhaps just beginning to sprout beneath the soil, and label it as less than the sturdy, mature tree that towers overhead. Both the seed and the tree have roles in nature and have embarked on their journeys at different times under different conditions. The same is true for you and those around you. You might be at an early stage of exploration, still discovering what truly nourishes you and what direction your life is meant to take. Others might seem further along in their careers, personal development, or relationships, but that disparity does not diminish your capabilities or future potential. Recognizing that your growth is unfolding at its own pace can help you release the pressure to conform to external timelines or to match someone else's speed. Your journey is yours alone, meant to be honored and nurtured rather than diminished through comparisons. When you find yourself slipping into the habit of comparing, one approach is to consciously pause and redirect your focus inward. This might involve taking a slow, deliberate breath, allowing your shoulders to relax, and reminding yourself to be present in the moment. You can then pose simple questions that guide you toward greater self-compassion. For instance, you might ask, "What is one recent achievement, no matter how small, that I can feel proud of?" Or, "How have I grown even subtly in an area that truly matters to me?" By posing these inquiries, you begin to shift the mental spotlight away from the perceived successes of others and onto the very real progress happening within your own life. Over time, this practice conditions your mind to celebrate personal milestones rather than critiquing them as insufficient in comparison to someone else's achievements. It is also essential to remember that the public face people present often highlights triumphs without revealing the challenges they overcame or continue to grapple with. In modern life, where social media can fill our screens with curated snapshots of success and happiness, we are frequently exposed to a filtered reality. We might see a friend posting about a new job promotion or a significant personal breakthrough, while they remain silent about the stress, setbacks, or moments of doubt that preceded their success. This creates an illusion that everyone else is advancing effortlessly through life while we alone struggle. From a Buddhist point of view, this illusion stems from ignorance of the interconnectedness and complexity inherent in every person's life. Nobody is exempt from hardships or failures, but these experiences often remain hidden behind bright smiles and proud announcements. Recognizing that your observations of others represent only part of their reality can lessen the sting of self-comparison. By reframing your perspective in this way, you begin to see that no life is purely one of accomplishments. Every journey contains moments of confusion, fear, and failure. When you compare yourself to a polished external image, you're measuring your behind-the-scenes reality against someone else's highlight reel. This is a skewed comparison at best and can never offer a fair or complete picture. Leaning into the teachings of Buddhism, you might learn to look at others with compassion rather than envy, understanding that all beings encounter suffering and seek happiness. Your ability to empathize will grow, and you may discover a quieter sense of satisfaction in your own process, free from the burden of constant comparison. Another strategy to break the cycle of self-doubt through comparison is to recognize your own distinct gifts and passions. Sometimes we fall into the trap of admiring what others do well without honoring the things we excel at. You might admire someone else's creative flair, professional prowess, or magnetic social presence, all the while overlooking the patience, empathy, or resilience you exhibit daily. Each person's talents and characteristics serve a unique purpose. In Buddhism, there is a recognition that our collective differences contribute to the richness of life. By identifying and valuing your unique contributions, you affirm your place in the broader tapestry of existence. Cultivating gratitude for who you are and the skills you possess can be an effective remedy for self-doubt. Through reflective practices, such as journaling or even taking a few mindful minutes before bed, you can acknowledge the attributes that make you feel most alive and engaged. Maybe you excel at listening to others without judgment, or you have an intuitive knack for solving problems in creative ways. By shining light on these attributes, you remind yourself that your strengths hold meaningful value. Moreover, as you shift your focus toward gratitude, negative comparisons lose their power. The more you appreciate your own path, the less likely you are to diminish it by holding it up against someone else's. It's also worth noting that in Buddhist philosophy, a core concept is the middle way, which encourages balance and a rejection of extremes. Applying this principle to the act of comparing yourself with others, It is not necessary to completely disregard the accomplishments of the people around you. Instead, you can learn to celebrate their successes without letting those achievements reflect negatively on you. The middle way here means allowing inspiration from others' stories to motivate you, while understanding that their journey is entirely their own. You can admire their determination or resourcefulness and simultaneously honor your own timeline and abilities. In this manner, you transform what could become an occasion for jealousy or self-deprecation into a source of healthy motivation that serves your own growth. Furthermore, the more you practice mindfulness, the more you become aware of when you start drifting into comparison mode. This awareness is crucial because it gives you the power to intervene. Instead of spiraling into discouraging thoughts, you can notice them and gently guide your focus back to self-compassion. You might catch yourself thinking, "I wish I had what they have," and in that moment, you can softly acknowledge the desire without judgment and remind yourself, "I am on my own path, and I trust its timing." Such self-soothing statements, when repeated sincerely, begin to anchor you in a calmer, more confident frame of mind. With consistent effort, you can transform comparison from a source of self-doubt into a tool for introspection. Rather than letting it undermine your confidence, consider using moments of envy or comparison as signals that you are yearning for something meaningful in your own life. Ask yourself what it is about the other person's achievement or qualities that appeals to you. Is it their dedication, their creativity, their sense of freedom? Once you identify what resonates with you, consider how you might foster that quality or outcome in your own unique way. This process can be incredibly empowering because it shifts the energy from envy to inspiration, from self-criticism to self-development. Ultimately, the practice of releasing comparisons and embracing your personal dharma is a gentle but powerful form of self-liberation. Each time you let go of the impulse to measure up to someone else, you create space to appreciate the remarkable progress you've already made. You begin to see your journey not as a race, but as a continual unfolding, one that is shaped by your values, passions, and evolving sense of purpose. Through this shift, self-doubt starts to fade, replaced by a quiet confidence that acknowledges both your human imperfections and the unique potential that lies within you. There may be times when you stumble back into old habits of comparison, but the key is to recognize those moments as opportunities to renew your commitment to self-acceptance and the cultivation of your own path. By consciously choosing to celebrate your growth and honor your unique qualities, you step away from the heavy burden of comparison. You learn to acknowledge that each person's story is complex, layered, and not always as flawless as it might seem on the surface. In doing so, you reclaim the energy that was once expended on self-deprecating thoughts and redirect it toward your own personal evolution. The result is a sturdier foundation of self-confidence, one that can support you in taking risks, pursuing meaningful goals, and offering your gifts to the world with a sense of authenticity. When you let go of measuring your worth against anyone else's, you unlock a profound capacity for joy and self-assuredness, allowing you to walk your Dharma path with renewed optimism and gratitude. 4. Embrace your imperfections. In a world that often pressures us to present ourselves as flawless, it's all too easy to let self-doubt take root the moment we notice any imperfection, be it a mistake we've made, a perceived shortcoming in our abilities, or even something as simple as a physical feature we wish we could change. Yet from a Buddhist perspective, imperfection is not just an unavoidable part of life, but a crucial one that offers us opportunities for growth, empathy, and self-discovery. This idea resonates strongly with the Japanese philosophy of wabi-sabi, which teaches us to find beauty in the incomplete, the imperfect, and the impermanent. Rather than viewing flaws as detrimental or embarrassing, wabi-sabi reframes them as natural aspects of being human, reminding us that imperfection need not be an obstacle to fulfillment or self-worth. Embracing this mindset can free us from the constant cycle of self-criticism and comparison that so often leads to self-doubt. Instead of believing that our value diminishes with every error or flaw, we can begin to see these moments as markers of resilience, evidence that we have tried, stumbled, learned, and continued to move forward. When you pause to consider the cracks and scars in your life, whether they be physical, emotional, or situational, it can help to envision them like chapters in a larger story. Each one signifies an event, a lesson, or a moment when you chose to persist despite adversity. This perspective shift is a gentle reminder that none of us emerged into the world fully formed or without struggles. Every misstep you've taken is part of the journey that has shaped you into who you are now. Rather than viewing your imperfections as proof of inadequacy, you can see them as the raw material of authenticity. Each flaw says, "I am human, I have grown, I am still here, trying and learning." By making this mental pivot, the narrative changes from one of shame to one of self-compassion. One of the first steps in embracing imperfection is acknowledging that perfection itself is an illusion. No matter how carefully curated someone's social media feed may look, or how flawless a person's life appears from the outside, no one truly lives without errors or shortcomings. Sometimes, external images of perfection are reinforced by cultural norms or entertainment media, which gloss over the complexities and messiness that exist behind closed doors. When we cling to these illusions, we create a benchmark that is impossible to meet. This inevitably fuels self-doubt because we start believing that if we could only be perfect, we would finally be worthy of love, respect, or success. Yet, chasing perfection is like chasing a mirage in the desert. It recedes the closer you get, leaving you perpetually unsatisfied and convinced that you lack something essential. By letting go of the need to measure up to unrealistic standards, you set yourself free from a burden that can weigh on your mind and heart. Instead of aspiring to a flawless persona, you can redirect your energy toward being authentic. Authenticity involves asking honest questions like, "What are my true values, and how can I embody them?" Or, "What unique strengths and experiences do I bring to the table, and how can they guide me toward my goals?" By focusing on self-awareness and growth rather than external perfection, you cultivate a mindset that is resilient and open to life's inevitable ups and downs. This shift in perspective also involves transforming your inner dialogue. It's striking how often we talk to ourselves in ways we would never speak to a dear friend. If a friend came to you upset about a mistake they'd made, your instinct might be to offer words of reassurance or constructive advice, never condemnation. And yet, when it comes to our own flaws, many of us default to harsh criticism or absolute statements like, "I always mess things up," or "I can never get anything right." Buddhism encourages awareness of this inner narrative. By noticing the words we choose when we speak to ourselves, we begin to see how language influences our mood and our sense of self. If you catch yourself using negative labels or catastrophic thinking, take a moment to pause and reframe. Instead of saying, "I'm such a failure," experiment with more compassionate alternatives like, "This is a chance to learn, everyone makes mistakes, and this one doesn't define who I am." Over time, these small acts of kindness toward yourself add up, gradually molding your overall self-perception into one that is gentler and more forgiving. Another helpful practice is to celebrate your progress, regardless of how modest or incremental it might seem. Many of us are hardwired to pay attention only to outcomes. Did we achieve the goal or not? But this results-oriented mindset often ignores the subtler growth that happens along the way. For instance, if your goal was to learn a new skill or develop a healthier habit, you might be tempted to focus solely on whether you've reached expert level or if you've stuck to your new routine perfectly. Yet, by acknowledging the learning curve, the small victories, and the gradual improvements in your mindset or technique, you shift the emphasis from an all-or-nothing measurement to a more balanced perspective. This can be as simple as jotting down a quick note at the end of each day about what you did well or a new insight you gained. By framing your journey around incremental gains and lessons learned, you create a positive reinforcement loop that encourages you to keep going despite any bumps in the road. It also softens the sting of any slips or setbacks because you're reminded that mistakes are natural stepping stones rather than signs of unworthiness. Embracing imperfection not only supports your own emotional well-being, but also serves as a powerful connector to others. Vulnerability, the willingness to be seen as we truly are, fosters genuine connections in ways that a polished facade can never achieve. When you allow yourself to be open about your struggles, anxieties, and flaws, you essentially give the people around you permission to do the same. This creates an environment of empathy and mutual understanding where deeper, more authentic relationships can flourish. Rather than feeling isolated by the aspects of yourself you consider inadequate, you can discover that many others have faced similar trials, harbored the same insecurities, or wrestled with parallel doubts. This shared human experience can be a profound source of support, reducing the isolating effects of self-doubt. By letting go of the need to maintain a perfectly controlled image, you become more approachable, and in turn, you can be more receptive to the kindness and wisdom others have to share. This sense of authentic community becomes a buffer against self-doubt, reminding you that you are not alone in your imperfections and that you are worthy of acceptance, both from yourself and from the people who matter in your life. Finally, it's important to reiterate that embracing imperfection is not about complacency or an excuse to stop growing. On the contrary, acknowledging your flaws and missteps can inspire a more constructive form of self-improvement. When you understand that errors are inevitable, you can approach them as valuable lessons rather than absolute failings. This mindset fuels curiosity and resilience, driving you to keep learning and adapting without the paralyzing fear of tarnishing an imagined pristine record. Ironically, this acceptance of imperfection may lead to more meaningful personal development than you would achieve through relentless self-criticism. In this way, self-compassion becomes a catalyst for genuine transformation. Each day, you can ask yourself what your imperfections have taught you and how they might guide you to a richer understanding of your capabilities, aspirations, and place in the larger tapestry of life. Gradually, you begin to see that you are, in fact, enough, just as you are, a unique individual whose strengths and weaknesses weave together to form a wholly authentic existence. This realization softens the edges of self-doubt, replacing it with a quieter confidence that acknowledges you may still have room to grow, but that you are inherently worthy in the present moment. Embracing your imperfections can feel like an act of liberation, opening up space for self-love, creativity, and meaningful connections. And as you internalize the understanding that imperfection is both universal and essential, you begin to live with a greater sense of ease and purpose. The aim is not to eliminate all errors or to achieve a polished, flawless facade, but to walk through life openly, acknowledging the scars and cracks that map your personal evolution and celebrating the resilience that has carried you this far. Through compassion, mindfulness, and consistent practice, you can transform your relationship with self-doubt, seeing it as a fleeting state rather than an unchangeable condition. Each time you choose to greet your imperfections with kindness instead of criticism, You take another step toward genuine self-acceptance, and by doing so, you permit others to do the same. This collective willingness to be real and imperfect creates a space where self-doubt finds less and less room to flourish, replaced instead by a gentle awareness that you are, in every meaningful sense, enough. 5. Take action even when you're scared. Fear is one of the most significant contributors to self-doubt, and it often arises as a persistent voice telling us we're not ready, not good enough, or destined to fail. Yet from a Buddhist perspective, fear is nothing more than a mental formation, an emotion that appears within our consciousness, but does not define who we are. Courage, then, is not the absence of this fear. It's the willingness to take action despite feeling afraid. Recognizing that fear will inevitably show up in your life and choosing to move forward anyway is a potent way to break free from the limiting narratives that keep you in a place of self-doubt. Each step you take while feeling uncertain builds a habit of resilience, showing your mind that, although fear may be present, it doesn't have the final say in your decisions or your sense of self-worth. When fear arises, it's helpful to acknowledge it without judgment. This simple act of naming the emotion, telling yourself, "I'm scared and that's okay," can dramatically lessen its grip on you. It's akin to turning on a light in a dark room. Once you see the shape of what you're dealing with, it no longer feels quite so overwhelming. At that point, you can ask yourself whether the fear is signaling a genuine need for caution or if it's simply an echo of past insecurities or learned habits. In Buddhist teachings, emotions like fear are seen as passing phenomena. They come and go like waves in the ocean of your mind. By observing these waves rather than letting them carry you away, you begin to understand that fear is not an order to stop, but rather an invitation to grow. It nudges you to examine the edges of your comfort zone and see where you might learn something new about yourself. Instead of leaping headfirst into daunting challenges, it can be useful to take small, intentional steps forward. If you're anxious about public speaking, start by talking to a friend or sharing your thoughts with a small group. This gradual approach allows you to build confidence and gather evidence that you can indeed act despite feeling afraid. Each small success piles up, weakening self-doubt's hold on you. Over time, the once paralyzing fear diminishes in intensity. You realize that the stories your mind spins of failure, embarrassment, or inadequacy rarely match the reality of stepping up and trying. In fact, sometimes the outcome is far better than you could have imagined, proving that many of the barriers you thought were insurmountable were primarily creations of your own mind. Mindfulness is another powerful ally in navigating fear. In moments of anxiety, try centering yourself through deep, steady breathing. As you inhale, acknowledge the presence of fear. As you exhale, visualize releasing the tension it brings. When you ground yourself in the present moment, you reduce the tendency to become lost in hypothetical worst-case scenarios. Fear often magnifies when we project ourselves into an unknown future, picturing failures or rejections that haven't even happened. By returning to the here and now, you realize you have choices available right this instant. You can choose to take a small step, to share a thought, or to ask for help, and each of these choices offers a path beyond the paralysis of self-doubt. Reframing the way you view failure or mistakes is also crucial in overcoming fear. Buddhism teaches that no effort is ever wasted, meaning every attempt, regardless of the outcome, contributes to your growth. When you treat so-called failures as opportunities for learning, you shift the narrative from "this proves I'm not good enough" to "this shows me a new way to improve." Each stumble reveals information about what does or doesn't work, refining your understanding of your capabilities and helping you build resilience. Rather than letting a misstep confirm your worst fears about your inadequacies, you can choose to see it as part of the natural process of getting better at anything you dare to try. This orientation towards curiosity and learning transforms the fear of failure into a willingness to experiment. Taking action in the face of fear also reconnects you with your deeper why. It's beneficial to pause and remind yourself why you've set a particular goal or chosen a certain path. Are you trying to share an important message? Do you hope to support someone in need? Are you pursuing a dream you've had for years? By focusing on your underlying purpose, you fuel your motivation to keep going even when fear rears its head. That sense of alignment with a larger intention can cut through doubts and worries, reminding you that what you stand to gain or learn is worth stepping outside your comfort zone for. Each time you choose to act despite fear, you confirm to yourself that you are stronger than your doubts, and this realization accumulates into a deep-seated belief in your own resilience. Alongside courage, developing self-compassion is one of the most transformative tools for overcoming self-doubt. In many cases, we're our own worst critics, scrutinizing every flaw and berating ourselves for every mistake. Buddhism teaches the practice of metta, or loving kindness, which begins with extending warmth and understanding toward ourselves. Recognizing that we're all inherently imperfect is part of this process. Mistakes and missteps aren't signs of personal failure. They are intrinsic to the human experience. When you treat yourself with kindness in the face of challenges, you create a supportive inner environment that fosters growth rather than stifling it with harsh judgments. To develop self-compassion, start by noticing the language you use in your internal dialogue. Perhaps you've noticed a critical voice telling you that you're not good enough, that you always mess up, or that you're unworthy of success. This voice often stems from past experiences, fear of judgment, or societal pressures to be perfect. Instead of trying to banish this inner critic, acknowledge its existence and respond gently. For instance, if you hear yourself thinking, "I can't do anything right," you might say, "It's okay to feel uncertain. I'm learning, and that's a process." This doesn't mean you ignore areas where you can improve. Rather, you approach those areas with a sense of kindness that makes improvement both more sustainable and less terrifying. As you cultivate self-compassion, it becomes easier to see your imperfections as facets of your humanity rather than as flaws that define your worth. Recognizing that everyone experiences fear, doubt, and occasional failure dissolves the illusion that you're uniquely flawed or falling behind some unattainable standard. When you embrace your own humanness, you naturally become more empathetic toward others too. This openness encourages authentic connections because showing vulnerability is a bridge to deeper understanding. People are drawn to kindness, and often they're relieved to find that they don't have to pretend to be perfect around you. By modeling self-compassion, you give others permission to treat themselves more gently, thereby creating an environment where growth and transformation are more readily embraced. Over time, the synergy between taking courageous action and practicing self-compassion reshapes the landscape of your inner world. As you continue to act in spite of fear, taking those small but meaningful steps, you accumulate evidence of your capabilities. Each accomplishment or lesson learned stands as proof that your fears, while real, need not be your defining narrative. Meanwhile, self-compassion ensures that mistakes and hiccups along the way don't derail your progress by plunging you into a cycle of self-reproach. Instead, you view them with understanding, glean the lessons they offer, and move on, bolstered by a gentle confidence in your capacity to adapt and grow. Fear becomes less of an insurmountable barrier and more of a companion, a reminder that you're stepping outside your comfort zone and evolving into a braver, wiser version of yourself. Ultimately, the journey of overcoming self-doubt is not about never feeling afraid or never making mistakes. It's about learning to navigate fear with courage and tempering your drive for growth with the softness of self-compassion. In doing so, you reclaim the power that self-doubt can take away. You prove to yourself that your worth is not determined by external validation or the absence of flaws. Rather, it emerges from your willingness to learn, to try, and to treat yourself with kindness through every triumph and setback. This process transforms fear from a roadblock into a stepping stone, allowing you to move forward in your life, guided by curiosity and fueled by a deeper understanding of your strengths. Each time fear surfaces, you'll have the tools to face it. A mindful acknowledgement, a commitment to taking one step at a time, and a compassionate response to whatever unfolds. In this way, you stand in your own power and learn to trust in the full, beautiful complexity of who you are. Mindfulness is at the heart of Buddhist practice, guiding us to observe our thoughts and emotions without judgment. When self-doubt or self-criticism emerges, the mindful approach is to pause and acknowledge it, recognizing that it is merely a mental event rather than an absolute reflection of who we are. This small, simple shift can have a profound impact on how we handle negativity. In that moment of awareness, we create a space between our thoughts and our identity. Instead of becoming entangled in cycles of harsh self-talk, we see that our doubts are just passing clouds in the broader sky of our consciousness. From this vantage point, it's easier to respond with compassion, gently reminding ourselves that one thought, or even an entire cascade of them, doesn't define our inherent worth. In cultivating compassion toward ourselves, one powerful step is to adjust the language we use internally. Many of us offer kind, supportive words to friends when they face challenges, yet neglect that same courtesy for ourselves. If a friend said, "I feel like a failure," we'd likely encourage them, saying something along the lines of, "You're human, and making mistakes is part of the journey." Extending these supportive statements inward requires conscious effort at first, yet it can fundamentally transform the way we perceive our own struggles. When a moment of self-criticism arises, "I can't believe I failed again," we might gently respond by saying, "It's okay to fail. Every attempt brings a lesson, and every lesson is progress." This simple reframing gradually rewires our self-talk from an echo of doubt to an echo of understanding. An important aspect of self-compassion is acknowledging our common humanity. Buddhism teaches the principle of interconnectedness, reminding us that no one navigates life without setbacks or doubts. Sometimes, when we feel burdened by our perceived flaws, we inadvertently isolate ourselves, believing we're the only ones experiencing such intense uncertainties. Yet suffering, mistakes, and missteps are universal. Simply remembering that countless others wrestle with their own versions of doubt can create a sense of belonging rather than isolation. This perspective softens our judgments and encourages us to be kinder to ourselves. Instead of chastising ourselves for being imperfect, we can say, "I'm part of a larger human family, and everyone stumbles at times." These stumbles, however, need not be sources of shame. Buddhism points out that life itself is inherently imperfect, and we share that imperfection. In other words, our flaws don't set us apart as failures. They connect us to the world at large. Embracing this outlook can turn mistakes into opportunities for growth. Whenever we falter, we have a choice: berate ourselves or remind ourselves that imperfection is a normal feature of being human. By choosing self-compassion, we transform each stumble into a stepping stone, a chance to learn and evolve. Over time, This outlook replaces the pursuit of perfection with a healthier, more realistic quest for authenticity and understanding. We begin to see that what we label as a flaw could just as easily be seen as a characteristic that makes us unique, capable of empathy, and perpetually open to learning. Another practice central to Buddhism is metta meditation, often translated as loving kindness meditation. In this simple yet potent exercise, you mentally repeat phrases like, "May I be happy," "May I be healthy," and "May I be free from suffering." At first, this may feel awkward or forced, particularly if you're used to a more critical internal narrative. But with consistency, these words begin to resonate, fostering a tangible warmth and kindness toward yourself. In time, you can extend that sense of loving kindness to others, friends, strangers, even people you find challenging. The ripple effect of this practice is remarkable. As you learn to nurture compassion within, you find it easier to show patience and understanding to those around you. Gradually, the voice of self-doubt quiets, replaced by an inner support system rooted in well-wishing and gentle acceptance. Forgiveness plays a vital role as well. Much of our self-doubt can be traced to regrets about past mistakes or missed opportunities. We hold ourselves hostage to actions we can't change, replaying scenarios in our minds and wishing we had done better. Buddhist philosophy teaches that clinging to guilt and shame only prolongs our suffering. Instead, we can regard our mistakes as part of a broader journey of learning. Forgiveness is a powerful gesture of self-compassion. It acknowledges that we did what we could with the awareness and tools we had at the time. Rather than condemning ourselves for not knowing better, we can celebrate the fact that we have grown. This shift allows us to unburden ourselves of regret and move forward with a clean slate, focused on applying the lessons we've learned. When we practice these elements of self-compassion, mindfulness, kind self-talk, recognition of shared humanity, embracing imperfections, metta meditation, and forgiveness, we create a firm foundation of inner strength. This inner resilience manifests in our daily lives as a calmer, more centered approach to challenges. Where once we might have been paralyzed by self-doubt, we now have the psychological space to consider solutions and take measured actions. Over time, this not only improves our emotional well-being, but also enhances our interpersonal relationships. As we become gentler with ourselves, we tend to become gentler with others, fostering an environment of openness and mutual respect. Yet it's important to remember that self-compassion is a lifelong practice rather than a one-time fix. We can't simply decide one day to be kinder to ourselves and expect all self-criticism to vanish overnight. Like any skill, self-compassion deepens through consistent, patient practice. We start small, perhaps by catching a single moment of negative self-talk each day and consciously transforming it into a message of understanding. Over time, these moments add up. Eventually, self-compassion becomes second nature, a reliable ally that guides us through moments of doubt and insecurity. This shift might be subtle at first, but each instance of kind self-dialogue paves the way for a more supportive, nurturing relationship with ourselves. Another critical step in overcoming self-doubt and embracing self-compassion is learning to take control of the stories we tell ourselves. Often these internal narratives trace back to childhood experiences, relationships, or cultural beliefs. We internalize certain themes, perhaps that we're not smart enough, not attractive enough, or not deserving of success, and replay them throughout our lives. Buddhism reminds us that we are not our thoughts. We are the awareness that observes them. This means we have the capacity to rewrite these narratives. The process begins by identifying the stories holding us back. When adversity strikes, do we default to, "I always mess up," or "I'll never succeed"? If so, we can step back and ask whether these beliefs are objective truths or just old tales fueled by fear and habit. Recognizing these limiting beliefs is essential, but it's equally important to replace them with more empowering stories. Once we know the script playing in our minds, scripts like "I'm unworthy" or "I can't change," we can consciously introduce new lines of thought, such as "I am capable of learning" or "My past does not dictate my future." At first, this may feel like wishful thinking, especially if the old stories have been part of our mental landscape for years. But with repetition and consistent validation through action, these fresh narratives gain strength. Suddenly, situations that once triggered self-doubt become arenas for self-discovery. Each time we challenge an old belief by trying something new or by choosing compassion over criticism, we gather evidence that we are indeed growing and transforming. This ongoing evolution of our internal narrative is a testament to our innate resilience. Buddhism holds that every moment is an opportunity for awakening, meaning each instance of self-awareness can spark transformation. By shaping our thoughts consciously, we shift our identity from passive recipients of doubt to active creators of our own path. Of course, this doesn't mean we'll never encounter negativity or fear. It simply means we're no longer defined by those feelings. Instead of seeing self-doubt as an immovable barrier, we come to view it as a signpost, an invitation to examine where we might need more understanding, more courage, or more compassion. Through patience, repeated effort, and a willingness to continually come back to these practices, we gradually dissolve the power of self-doubt. We realize that we are not helpless victims of our conditioning or our past mistakes. Each day, we have another chance to speak kindly to ourselves, to embrace our imperfections, to extend loving kindness through metta-meditation, and to reinterpret the stories that shape our view of what's possible. And each day, as we accumulate these small shifts, we inch closer to a deeply rooted sense of self-worth that can withstand life's inevitable ups and downs. In recognizing our shared humanity, we align ourselves with a larger universal truth, that we are all on a journey, learning as we go, deserving of patience, empathy, and forgiveness. Through mindful awareness and self-compassion, we become not only observers, but also authors of our own lives, empowered to navigate challenges with a steadier heart and a clearer mind. Recognizing and challenging limiting beliefs is a transformative step toward reshaping your life story. Begin by identifying the narratives you've been telling yourself, perhaps tales of unworthiness or inevitable failure. Then, question them gently and honestly. Ask, is this story grounded in fact, or is it just something I've carried over from past experiences? If you wouldn't speak these words to a cherished friend, why speak them to yourself? This simple act of inquiry allows you to see your stories as constructs that can be revised, rather than unchangeable truths. Once you've pinpointed a limiting thought, rewrite your narrative in a way that empowers you to move forward. Drawing on Buddhist teachings about mindfulness, observe each negative storyline as it arises. Instead of, "I'm a failure," you might adopt, "I made a mistake, but I'm learning and improving." Instead of, "I'm not talented enough," try, "My skills can grow with dedicated effort." Such reframing is not about glossing over obstacles. It's about recognizing your potential and remembering that you hold the power to change and evolve. Taking ownership of your journey is the next critical step. In Buddhism, the concept of karma reminds us that our actions shape our reality. This means you are not merely a bystander in your own life. Rather, you have the agency to direct its course. If your chosen story is, "I am capable of learning new things," reinforce it by enrolling in a class, experimenting with a new hobby, or tackling a project you've been putting off. Each decision you make, no matter how small, shows your mind that you're serious about living in accordance with your new, more hopeful narrative. An equally important aspect of rewriting your life story is letting go of the past. Often the limiting beliefs we cling to have roots in painful memories or regrets. Buddhism teaches the value of releasing attachment to these old wounds, recognizing that they don't dictate what lies ahead. Instead of allowing past failures to keep you locked in self-doubt, use them as building blocks for growth. Ask yourself, what did this experience teach me? And how have I become stronger because of it? By reframing your past as a source of lessons rather than an anchor, you free yourself to envision a future that better reflects your true capabilities. Ultimately, taking control of your story means stepping into your own power. Through mindful awareness, you come to understand that your thoughts do not define you. They are simply patterns that can be changed with patience and practice. By challenging outdated beliefs, rewriting negative scripts, and consciously choosing actions aligned with who you aspire to be, you begin to shape a life guided by possibility rather than fear. In releasing the weight of past regrets and seeing each mistake as a lesson, you open the door to continual growth. Over time, you'll discover that the story you tell yourself is no longer one of limitation, but of resilience, empowerment, and renewed hope. 6. Cultivate gratitude and self-reflection. Taking control of your story involves more than simply discarding old limiting beliefs. It also means recognizing and celebrating the many positive elements that already shape your life. When you practice gratitude, reflecting on your accomplishments, the hurdles you've cleared, and the strengths you've developed, you shift your perspective from what you lack to what you've gained. This mindset of appreciation reinforces a more positive, empowering narrative, reminding you that you have already proven your resilience and capability in countless ways. Even small victories, such as completing a challenging task or offering kindness to someone in need, serve as evidence that you are growing and evolving. Over time, these moments accumulate to form a solid foundation of self-belief. Regular self-reflection is a key ally in maintaining a constructive life story. Journaling or meditating on questions like, what kind of person do I want to be? Or how can I honor that vision today? Helps you remain aligned with your long-term goals. You might also examine which beliefs have outlived their usefulness. For instance, if you find yourself thinking, I'll never improve at this skill, ask whether that statement truly holds up when compared to your past track record of learning and adapting. By being mindful of these thoughts, you can gently let go of the ones that no longer serve you, replacing them with ideas more reflective of your current reality and future potential. Embracing your role as the author of your story centers on the realization that you are not defined by your circumstances, mistakes, or the opinions of others. In Buddhist teachings, change is always possible because life is in constant flux. The Buddha's journey exemplifies how understanding and deliberate action can shift both inner and outer realities. Likewise, you have the capability to rewrite your narrative, moving from a place of self-doubt to one of self-belief. This transformation doesn't happen in an instant, but rather through consistent, mindful choices that accumulate over time. Every day offers you a fresh page, an opportunity to recommit to your vision and actively shape the unfolding chapters of your life. By releasing the grip of self-doubt, you open yourself to a story propelled by possibility and growth. This shift doesn't mean challenges disappear. Rather, it means you face them with renewed confidence, informed by past lessons and guided by a clear purpose. You start to trust yourself more, recognizing that while obstacles may arise, they do not define your journey's ultimate direction. Instead, they become part of the dynamic, ever-evolving landscape that you navigate with courage and resilience. Ultimately, taking charge of your story grants you the freedom to live in alignment with your deepest values. You become the author of a narrative that reflects your strengths, honors your past experiences, and looks forward to future discoveries. In doing so, you empower yourself to move beyond the confines of self-doubt and into a life marked by self-awareness, genuine fulfillment, and unwavering self-belief. Thank you for watching. I hope these 7 lessons, rooted in timeless Buddhist wisdom, have given you practical tools to challenge self-doubt and reclaim your life. Which lesson resonated with you the most? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts and personal experiences. For more insightful and empowering content, your support helps this channel grow, allowing us to continue exploring meaningful topics that spark positive change. Every comment you share might spark hope in someone else's journey. Together, let's build a community that uplifts, motivates, and reminds us all of our infinite potential. Until next time, remember that every small step you take towards self-awareness and personal growth counts. Keep believing in yourself and trust that your journey unfolds at the right pace. Take care and keep moving forward with confidence.